Today on Let It Rip Weekend, tragedy at a Florida high school. 17 murdered, many more injured after a former student opens fire with an assault rifle.
I knew he wasn't okay when he punched the window in and said, "I'm gonna cause karma one day," because he got in trouble with the teacher.
But locally, what are schools in and around Detroit doing to keep our students safe?
If all our government and president can do is send thoughts and prayers, then it's time for victims to be the change that we need to see.
Let It Rip Weekend starts right now.
And it's time now to Let It Rip. I'm Marielle Liu.
And I'm Charlie Langton. All right, joining us now on the panel. First, his district is one of the only one in the state with its own full police authority. Dr. Nikolai Vitti is here. He is superintendent of the Detroit Public Schools Community District. And next to him, superintendent of the Madison District Public Schools, that's in Madison Heights, Randy Speck, a smaller district. He would be hesitant to have anyone armed on his campus here. Dr. Vitti, let me start with you, though. Tragedy happened in Florida. Have you had people ask you, could this happen in Detroit?
Sure. I think we should be asking that question in every district throughout the country. And I think educators, school systems need to do everything they can to be preventive on these issues, be proactive, creating systems and processes to react if something like this happened. But I think we have to speak truth to the reality that every community, every zip code could be dealing and facing with a mass shooting. That's a reality in this country, and we need to start talking about it.
Randy Speck, in Detroit, they have metal detectors, they have armed guards. You're a district of about little under 2,000, his is 50,000. But should you have armed guards or metal detectors?
Well, I don't think we're at a place where we need that. It's about the community and really having the community input, engagement, and something like that. I mean, what happened in Florida, that's the worst nightmare of a school system and of teachers and of parents and of school leaders and those kinds of things. And as we think about, we go back and we look at our policies and we revise our building procedures. We think about what we need to do reactionary, and at the same time we also are always thinking about in a proactive manner with our teachers and our parents and our social workers and our counselors and our building leaders, what do we do to make sure we're recognizing warning signs if they come up?
Is there a review of the policy every time something like this happens? Are our school leaders getting together in a meeting, reviewing the procedures that they have in place and making sure that they're the best for that school system?
Absolutely. We did that at the beginning of the year. For example, we extended and expanded the use of security officers so that every school would have one. In DPSCD, we will be reviewing processes and procedures. But again, we have to speak truth to this reality. We can create systems, processes. Our educators are all working hard and fast to build relationship with children. But at the end of the day, if we're going to tell parents that we can be foolproof in this situation, we're lying. Every community could be facing a mass shooter. We need gun control in this country. We don't want to talk about it. You may not want to talk about it. We need gun control in this country. AR-15s are weapons to kill people efficiently, and we need to do something about this because we have mental health issues in this country, throughout the world. Scotland, 1996, had a mass shooting at a school. The people rallied behind the government to demand gun control. Gun control was passed, and we haven't had a mass shooting in England since 1996. It continues to happen in our country because we're not facing the reality that we need gun control in this country.
It seems to me that the two of you, along with your teachers, your staff, might be on the first line. You maybe know people like Mr. Cruz, perhaps. But what do you do if you expel a student? Do you check students' social media, for example? Because there apparently were warning signs with the shooter in Florida.
Yeah, I mean, students talk and parents talk. And so that kind of information is shared with school leaders. School leaders are sharing that kind of stuff with local law enforcement officials, whether it's in Detroit or Madison Heights or wherever it is. And then you release it to those folks and you let them start to work those those angles and talk to parents, go to people's homes and those kinds of things. So you are engaged with it.
But will you go on a student's social media site, Facebook, Instagram, whatever
Absolutely.
it may be?
If we get that information, of course.
Will you expel them for that if they post something on guns?
You start to look into it. You start to look into it. And to Dr. Vidi's point about, the kind of change that we need in this country, what we might start to see happening, because the adults can't get it together, is when you see those students in Florida, who they're the ones who are going in front of the camera and they're the ones who are holding rallies, they're the ones who are going to start pushing for some kind of a change, because these students in this generation that can get in front of a camera quicker than we can get on the news, they're the ones who may start pushing the change, and we may not need to start listening to them.
If I could say one thing to that same point, it's interesting that we're talking about arming teachers, right, with weapons, and we hear this from the legislature. If you actually ask a practitioner, a teacher, a principal, a superintendent, they will say, we don't want more guns in schools. We don't need to arm teachers. But this is, again, the disconnect that we have in this country and in this state, where we have legislators moving forward on policy without even talking to people on the ground, practitioners. Ask teachers, ask parents, ask students. They don't want more guns in schools. They don't want more armed teachers in schools, or teachers armed in period.
Would you let a teacher in school with, assuming the teacher has a CPL license,
No.
would you allow? You would not.
No. Michigan right now needs more help in early literacy. Yeah. We don't need more help in early gun advocacy. For our kindergarten teachers need to know how to teach kids how to read, not to be able to pull out a gun. So of course not. The conversation, and Dr. Vidi's right, there has to be truth. We are trying to create educational environments, whether it's a large school system or a smaller one, where we can, to the best of our ability, protect a 6-year-old's innocence and a 17-year-old's innocence, as much as 17-year-olds have at that point, to be able to learn and to be able to grow in who they are. It is impossible to protect crazy world from coming into our place of education 100%. But all of our teachers and all of our school systems try every day to do it.
What does it do to the students to see the metal detectors and the armed guards? And does that mess with the psyche of a child? And is that a part of the reason why you don't want to see that in your district?
Yeah, I'll, as someone who's worked in New York City, worked in Jacksonville, Miami, Detroit is one of the few districts that have metal detectors that I've worked in. And it does play on students' psyche and thought when they come to school. The more we talk about metal detectors, the more we look at schools as penitentiaries. But it's a reality. I mean, that's what we talk about violence. Many of our kids in our school system deal with violence every day, deal with gun violence every day. Schools are often sanctuaries for them of safety. Although all schools are dealing with bullying issues, when we talk about gun violence, sometimes schools are actually the safest place that many of our students in Detroit have. So yes, it does affect their psyche, but in many ways it's a reality in order to create prevention with guns coming into schools in Detroit.
If you would have looked at the shooter in Florida's Facebook page, you may have seen some very disturbing thoughts, maybe some telegraphing that he might come back to a school and shoot the place up. Would you have gone to the police?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Why do you think the shooter was allowed to get into school and do what he did?
Well, I don't know the facts, but there was intervention. There was outreach. I think certainly the FBI looks as if they dropped the ball, and there could have been more intervention. But from what I've read and what I've seen, the school acted on issues. The student was placed in an alternative school, went into the school without authority, without authorization. But at the end of the day, that does not happen if there's gun control that prevents citizens having AR-15s. You cannot kill that many children with a knife or a handgun, period.
And that's what one of those students said yesterday. Yeah, it's a mental health issue, and yet people with guns hurt people, but he wouldn't have hurt that many people with a knife.
Do you think that will happen? Are you advocating a ban of the AR-15?
Absolutely, without question.
Yeah, of course.
What about reasonable gun control? Why don't you think it's happening? Why aren't we doing it?
Because we have an NRA in this country, and we have politicians that are afraid to run, not only on the gun issue, but what NRA is able to do to influence elections beyond just a gun control issue, because it's a matter of raising funding raising funds and influencing races beyond just the issue of gun control.
Do you think that we're going to see more Florida-type incidents if we don't ban AR-15s?
Well, possibly. And what's frustrating, probably from a standpoint of looking at the tragedy in Florida, is if we couldn't get something done after elementary kids were killed in Sandy Hook, how are we ever going to get something done?
Yeah.
We need folks in Lansing, we need folks in Washington, Tallahassee, wherever the state houses are, to get this stuff taken care of.
This is not a Second Amendment issue. This is a child safety issue. This is a child safety, not a Second Amendment issue. Two distinct issues.
Hold that thought. We are not done. Don't forget, share your thoughts on Twitter using the hashtag #LetItRip.
All right, coming up after the break, we'll tell you what 2 experts say we can do right now to prevent a similar tragedy locally. That's coming up.
And welcome back to Let It Rip Weekend.
Here with us this morning, now we have Lee Chiquette. Lee is a security expert who says that students and teachers need to be taught proper self-defense techniques in case they ever encounter an armed person. And Adam Helfman of Hire It Done. He says that there should be especially designed safe rooms in schools that would keep a gunman out and the people inside would be protected. Lee, first question to you. What should a child do, a teacher do, if they are faced with this situation and there is a gunman in the school right now?
Well, the answer to this question is that with proper training, there is a way to neutralize the threat right away, because time is of the essence. It usually takes law enforcement several minutes, maybe up to 5 minutes or more, to show up on the scene. Usually by that time, most of the damage is done already, which is what happened in this case also. So kind of similar to this movie that just came out, 1517 to Paris, which shows you, based on a true story, where the terrorists showed up with the AK-47, which is a similar weapon to AR-15. And the 3 Americans who were on this train actually took them down right away. Nobody got killed. There were a few injuries, but nobody got killed.
I thought you're supposed to run away.
Well, oftentimes you don't have an opportunity to do that. Running away is an option if you have it available. Sometimes it's not available. For example, in the case of the Florida shooter, reportedly he showed up there with a gas mask with some smoke grenades, and he set off the fire alarm. So right away, he defeated the system that was supposed to keep the students in the locked rooms. Therefore, they're out there being easy targets for him.
Just let me understand that. Are you advocating? So what are you advocating to do? If I'm in the room with a gunman, what should I approach him?
If you have proper training, you have to immediately collapse the distance between you and the bad guy, take him down, and stop his ability to inflict harm and damage to other people. You can do it. Whether you're armed or not armed is a different question altogether, but you can do it either way.
And that might not be something, though, that you can teach kids and teachers to do. First, you don't really know how you'll react, I would think, even with training, when you're actually faced with that situation.
The training is actually the answer to that, and I teach regular people to do it all the time. I also teach law enforcement, fire department, just about everybody, because this threat is present everywhere now. It's not just in school, churches, buses,
it's
anywhere.
Everywhere. All right, hold that thought. Okay, Adam, let's bring you in here. You are advocating something called a safe room, a panic room. It's a special room in a house, a school, an office building. What is it?
Okay, so the concept is, and let's use a schoolroom because of the topics today, where the students have a place to go where it'll be safe, it'll be bulletproof, and it will, most importantly, buy them time. Because in the span of 5 minutes, which seems like an eternity in an emergency, the cops can get on site and can protect, and this will allow the children to stay alive. It's a room inside the classroom. It folds up against the wall like an accordion. You pull it out, and in 20 seconds, ballistically, it's bulletproof. The kids can get in there, lock themselves in, and have a safe room.
So every classroom would have one of these rooms?
Dr. V's taking notes in the background there, and so is Randy Speck. So they're taking about this. Is this how much would this cost?
You know, it depends. Obviously, you want to do it for every room in a school, probably $10,000 to $12,000 per room. Now, remember, if you go to the parents and say, listen, you trust us for your children every day, I am sure they will find the funding to fund something like that to save a life.
Most of some schools, unfortunately, can't find the funding for the kids to be able to take books home right now. So I don't know that they would be able to find the funding. Would we then, in your theory, be looking at a situation where the more affluent school districts would be able to afford this protection and the lower income districts would not?
It's a great question. So it comes down to the fact about leadership. What is leadership planning on doing, and what are people going to do to join forces to do something? We need to do something. We agree. Whether it's gun control or spending the money on making the children safe, we have to react and do something. We can't just keep talking and talking and talking. Like Dr. Vitti said, we've known about this for a long time. Something has to be done.
We've had, depending on who you talk to, 8 to 18 gun incidents in schools this year. And we're only in the second month. Why? Why so much violence in our schools, Lee?
Well, I would say that unfortunately there are a lot of people who have mental issues. There are people who have all kinds of issues. And another thing is that these shootings that you're referring to, Charlie, they're evolving. They're not all the same. These killers, they go on internet and they look at Facebook, Twitter. They learn what the other killers did, and they learn from that, and it's an evolving situation. We have to have what I would call a flexible response to that threat. We can't just do what we always did in the past. I agree entirely. We have to adapt to the situation to keep the school safe. And like I said, it's not just a school. Same thing happens in churches. Same thing happens in movie theaters, everywhere.
He said that the kid in Florida was able to kind of buck the system because he pulled the fire alarms.
He actually used their own system against him.
Right. So is your system then foolproof? It seemed that this child, as you said, was able to learn from what the procedure was and find a way around that. Is there any real protection then for our students?
Well, I would say yes, there still is, because the minute the fire alarm goes off, that triggers a response. Get up and either get out of the school, but the minute you hear gunfire, students are going to know, oh boy, get back into the classroom, barricade the door, get into the safe room, and wait for the police to come. I mean, unless you run away from the situation and risk it that way, that's another alternative. However, knowing that is the insurance policy that you never want to have happen. But if it's there, you can be like, okay, at least we have an alternative.
Are you both gun control advocates? Should we have AR-15s? Is there any, or the AK-47, the AR-15, any reason to have those at all?
Well, let me just say this. I can't speak to that. Let me just say that whether you have gun control or you don't have gun control, the reality is that these guns are present and they're going to continue to be present. So when somebody shows up with a weapon, you can't tell them, hey, put it down, you know, that we have gun control in this country. So consequently, I think we should deal with the reality of life and be able to offer reasonable protection whether people have guns or they don't have guns. Either way, that would be my answer to this question.
All right.
All right, coming up, final thoughts from our guest after the break. Don't forget, use the hashtag when you tweet, when you log on to Facebook, Let It Rip. We'll be right back.
All right, welcome back to Let It Rip. Dr. Vitti and all of our panelists here, Randy Speck and Adam Huffman and Lee Scheiket as well. All right, let's go down the line there.
Very quickly, a final thought from you all.
So final thought, I have no reason to believe that these two men are not good men. In this economy, it's what's the problem, what's the solution? We have to stop making money off a problem. The solutions are more about creating these comic book type scenarios, shoot them out, everyone's protected, everyone has a gun, make another product to make children safe. At the end of the day, let's get guns off streets, let's have gun control, let's continue to invest in mental health. It's a balance between the two, but we're not going to solve the problem with more guns and more violence.
Randy?
Yeah, the reality is this isn't a TV show, it's not a movie. It's not, our teachers aren't Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, being able to go from teaching reading all of a sudden to be able to pull out a gun and be able to do that. This isn't a TV show and movie. It is going to take leadership, though. I heard the word a few minutes ago about leadership. It is going to take leadership, and we may find this time that kids are going to say, listen, if adults aren't going to take care of it, we're going to take it to the state houses and we're going to take it to Congress.
Well, my final thought is that I believe we should deal with the reality of life, where it is possible that some people will fall through the cracks and they will show up in school with some kind of weapon trying to kill and injure the students. So I think we should provide some training, at least to the staff, to show them what they can do to address that and keep the students safe. That would be my thought.
I think the AR-15 banning that is a scapegoat. I think we need common sense. We need a multi-faceted approach to getting education to the kids. They need to know what to do in an emergency. We have tornado and fire alarms. We need to have an active shooter preparedness from the schools.
That was something that we saw a lot online. A lot of people saying, okay, well, we have fire alarms in case of fire. Do we need an active shooter alarm as well for our students? But an interesting tweet. Randy, I'll give this one to you. This person says it's not about gun control. This is from Douglas. It's about parenting.
Well, parenting's a part of it. So is community engagement. So is social workers. So are the engagement from everyone around. It's not just one person, but the school. What's happening is the school systems are being asked to be everything. We are asked to be parents. We are asked to be the educators. We're asked to be the social workers and the counselors. And now we're also being asked to be law enforcement.
Let me get to Jim Polk writes, proper self-defense techniques includes the ability to shoot back. Dr. Beatty, how do you respond to that?
Again, more guns in a location leads to an increase in the probability of using those guns. Doesn't make sense. We did have a breakdown in the family structure actually we didn't. My understanding is this shooter was an orphan and was given up for an adoption. So yes, we can all argue that we have family structures that are not at the high level that they should be. We have mental health issues, but those individuals, if they have easy access to weapons, they will use them without gun control. It's not creating a scapegoat situation by saying we need gun control or AR-15 should be off the streets.
All right, thank you very
We've got
much.
so much we could do this here. We got all kinds of questions here. Thanks so much there. That is it for this edition of Let It Rip Weekend. Thank you, panelists. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you,
Until
Charlie.
next week. Thank you so much for staying with us. The news is next.